carried. So I just think it's an interesting, is it interesting or is it on purpose? I think it's on purpose. And again, when you're looking at this, how could any writer know that thousands of years later this was going to happen? Amazing. You could not make this up. Okay, and make it all fit together. That's why I'm just another proof to me of the Bible's historicity, its authenticity. Okay. So he did that. And so Isaac speaks up to his father. And he says, yes, my son. He says, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? He said, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the two of them went up together. He built the altar. He arranged the wood, and he bound up his son and laid him on the altar at the top of the wood. And he reached out his hand, and he took a knife to slay his son. And the angel Lord cried out and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. He says, don't lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him now that I know you fear God. Okay, angel of the Lord, but now it's God talking. Again, don't ever get confused that angels are God, but they may precede God as he speaks because of the presence. Now that I know you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw the ram. So here's the truth of all this that happened. When Isaac said, well, first of all, when Abraham told the two servants, stay here, me and my son are going to go worship, he was worshiping God by sacrificing to him. So that wasn't a lie. Then when Isaac said, where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And he says, God will provide it. That wasn't a lie, because he was the provision, Isaac. But once he had proven himself, God said, it was a test. It's a big deal. For God to assimilate himself to Abraham, saying, I'm willing to give up my one and only son. Are you willing to give up your one and only son? Because your one and only son is actually coming from you. The descendant is my one and only son that will save all people for all time. So, and then not only that, God did also provide a physical offering, the ram that was in the thicket. One thing I've always wondered about, and I have yet to see this, and I've just always wondered about it, is Abraham was depending on God that if his son died, that he would resurrect him, because it was through that son that he was going to have all the descendants of the earth. So he's still trusting God. This is still a huge place of faith, the biggest ever piece of faith that you're going to see, is that he would do that he would trust him, that even if the son was killed, he would still must be resurrected. And guess what? God's only son was resurrected. There you have it. The thing that I do wonder about was when it says that in verse 9 it says he bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar. I wonder, did Isaac fight him, or did he just be complicit with it and let himself be bound? Did he explain it to him? Did Isaac just trust his father so much? Was he too weak? No, he was old enough. I mean, he was carrying the firewood. So that's an interesting part of the story that I have never read a commentary, a study help, or anything else. If you see that, I'd be real interested. That explained that part. And certainly the scripture itself doesn't speak to it. It doesn't say why. It just says that he bound him up. It's like, well, did he fight him to bind him up? Or did his son just put his hands out and he bound him up? Or, how'd that happen? I mean, to be killed and sacrificed. So was he also placing faith in his dad and God, that even if it was him that was the sacrifice, God would provide? It's an amazing story, really. And so anyway, Abraham took the ram and sacrificed it instead of his son, and the place of the Lord was called The Lord Will Provide. And to this day, and on that mountain, it is called, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. You got to remember, Hebrew and English are not translated the same. So that long sentence is actually wrapped up in two words, and that is one of God's name, which is Yahweh Yireh. We call it Jehovah, which is also the name for Yahweh. Jehovah Jireh instead of Jireh, and that is how we pronounce it. And what does it mean? It means the Lord will provide. And that same name, by the way, is used to this day during the substitutionary sacrifices in the temple. They're obviously not real sacrifices anymore. They're substitutionary. And they still use that name when they do that practice. Okay, so let's skip on down. We see that Nahor has sons. It names them all. Then there's the death of Sarah. So in chapter 23, whoops, we're going to 24. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died in Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for her and weep over her. He rose from beside her dead body and spoke to the Hittites. He says, I'm a stranger here. I'm a foreigner in this land. Sell me some property so I can bury the dead. That's the first time he says it. The Hittites replied, Sir, listen to us. You're a mighty prince among us, so bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. And he rose up and he said, If you're willing, let me bury the dead. And then listen to me and intercede for Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf so he can sell me the cave of Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of the field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you. They said, No, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field. I'm skipping a few verses at a time. Bury your dead. Abraham again bows down before the people of the land and says to Ephron in their hearing, Listen to me if you will. I will pay the full price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead. Ephron said, Listen to me, Lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver, but what is that between us? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms. What that means is he finally got a price now, kind of a roundabout way, and he agrees to the terms, weighed out the price, and he bought the land. And, 5 times. I don't know, is there some significance to that? I think Abraham wanted to make sure that his... there's a footnote here. Okay, it says Abraham's acquisition of the land for Sarah is his first legal ownership of the promised territory. So he wants to make it legal. And the Hittite may have offered an attempt to prevent Abraham from acquiring the rights. Maybe that's, maybe it sounds nicer than it was. I don't know. And so Abraham's just absolutely adamant that no, he wants to pay for it. He wants it to be his legal land. So Ephraim's field and Machpelah near Mamre, these are all in that same area that we keep talking about. But the field and the cave in it, because, burial tombs, they used to use caves. And all the trees within the border was deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate to the city. Afterward, he buried his wife in the cave near Mamre, which is called Hebron, in the Hebron Valley. We'll learn more about that when we get to the New Testament. In the land of Canaan, so the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. We've now heard that 5 times, 6, 7 times. Do you see how it's trying to be made very clear here? You're going to need to know this later. I'm going to repeat it so there's no way somebody says this and gets it wrong. Okay, so now we're in chapter 24. Abraham was very old by now. The Lord blessed him in every way, and to a senior servant, Abraham says, Put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord. And that was part of the ritual. And I keep in mind, I've always thought, well, wow, if a man puts another man's hand under his thigh, that's not something a man does, but it's a very private part. Remember, the man's privates down there give life. And to get that personal and to hold on and look each other in the eye, not with any kind of lust or wrongdoing, but look him in the eye and say, I'm swearing. It is a very personal, up close, I won't forget this moment thing. And if somebody else knows anything else about, here it is. It says, I love this Bible. This is the Woman's Study Bible. It says, the placing of the hand near the reproductive organs symbolizes that the oath was sworn to his entire clan and to all the descendants. Okay, so that means that this is a promise that's being made to generations. I said the organ that produces life. They said the reproductive organs. Maybe that's how I should. Anyway, it symbolizes that the oath goes not just between those two men, but for generations that will come from that man, from his reproductive organs. Okay. And what was the swear? He wants him to go to his country, and for his and by his own relatives, and get a wife for his son Isaac. In other words, I want to make sure that the wife of my son is Hebrew, is a Jewish person. This is important to the lineage towards Jesus, okay? The servant says, what if the woman's unwilling to come back? Shall I take your son back there? And he says, no, don't take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household in my native land, spoke to me and said, he will send his angel before you. There's his angel that goes before him. I don't know if it's the same one every time, or, I mean, we never get the name, but it's not Jesus. Jesus is not an angel. I want to be very clear on that, because some people in other cults believes that Jesus is an angel. He is not. Could he be if he wants to? Sure. He can be anything he wants to be. He could be anything he wants to be, but he's not. He's God. Okay, so, and he will make it possible for you to get the wife. If the wife is unwilling, then you're released from those. You're released from this, because that's how sure he is that God will do what he says he'll do. But don't take my son back there. Don't do it. That's not what you're supposed to do. Then the servant left, taking with him his master's camels and all kinds of good things from his master. And I thought, why did it say that? Well, because if you was fixing to see somebody that's going to say, I'm looking for a wife, when you want to see a whole bunch of Mercedes-Benz and some nice jewelry and wonderful food and clothing, and they're giving gifts. They're giving fancy gifts, okay? In that analogy, the camels would be Mercedes-Benz. Okay, so anyway, the camels kneel down near the well outside. It was towards the evening, the time that the women go out to draw water. That's an important thing that is noted in the Bible, because remember, when Jesus speaks to the woman at the well in the New Testament, it's during the daytime. And there's a reason for that. This is the time that the women go out is to draw water, is in the evening. Okay, we'll get to that in the New Testament. Then he prayed, Lord God of my master Abraham, show kindness to my master Abraham. So this is the servant praying for his master, that God will show kindness and get the wife that he wants. And that he'll do that for him, because he's the one to go find her. Okay, drink. And he said,